Hello guys, how are you? A lot of people ask us how do we feel in Ukraine because apart from this constant attacks from Russia, we experience constant attacks from the White House. Well, it's difficult, but as Winston Churchill advised us, if you are going through hell, keep going. And I think that the best psychotherapy for us in Ukraine and for those worried about Ukraine around the world is more Russian geography lessons. Because, yes, despite all of that chaos, despite the cut off US intelligence sharing with Ukraine, despite the ban to share satellite images with us and the frozen delivery of weapons, Ukrainian drones keep doing the job and they visited Leningrad region oil refinery and a military plant in Bryansk. There were explosions, there were messages that once again demonstrate to those who can see Russia is vulnerable and can only be saved by Donald Trump. And our task is not to let this happen. My name is Anna, I'm from Ukraine, I'm in Ukraine, and if you want to see the defeat and demilitarization of Russia, which is the only working peace plan, subscribe, we discuss all of that on the channel. To tell you the truth, I try to read news less because every time I read messages from the White House, I wonder when will people start reacting, because this does look like a coup. This total change of foreign policy is a worrisome symptom, and not just for Ukraine. I don't know if you've noticed, but even the leaders of such super authoritarian countries as China and Iran say it's not okay to undermine Europe, to undermine Ukraine, to demonstrate this total disrespect to your former allies and allies that were your allies for centuries. So it's not okay, and it's really difficult to remain sane, especially after very strong missile attacks that Russia targets on Ukraine, demonstrating disrespect to Trump's efforts. And he's not surprised. It is a very vivid illustration that he is an enemy of Ukraine. I mean, Donald Trump, when speaking about these attacks that took place after the United States shut down intelligence sharing with Ukraine, he says he understands Putin. Anyone would do that from the point of view of Donald Trump. And he keeps repeating that it's much easier for him to negotiate with Russia than with Ukraine, because somehow, without intelligence, without new weapons, that Ukraine still does not want to surrender. He speaks that openly. And this surprises not just us here, not just European leaders, but even Chinese and Iranian leaders. Why? Because they think such crazy shift can actually lead to serious, tremendous turbulence around the world, and maybe Trump will be the one to blame for the start of the Third World War. But here in Ukraine, we keep doing what we can, and drones mean a lot. By the way, another reason why many countries need Ukraine in NATO, with our skills, with our experience, with our construction possibilities even. Because Ukrainian drones have performed a number of very successful missions, and many of them are deep inside the Russian Federation, sometimes reaching almost 2,000 kilometers, unstoppable. And this time, drones travel to Leningrad. Yes, they still have a region in Russia named after Lenin, because they are still very much a communist country, and they dream to reconstruct the Soviet Union. And it seems like Donald Trump does not mind and actually pushes Putin to continue when he says that, well, Article 5, we have to review it, no one is helping America. so we won't help anyone. This is lies. There are so many examples when people from Britain, when people from France, when people from Ukraine helped various American military missions. It is such an ignorance, it is such an hypocrisy that honestly I cannot understand how people in the United States, educated people in the United States, accept that and keep walking, drinking coffee. In Ukraine, we typically react. Please share this video, that's important, and subscribe to demonstrate your solidarity with Ukraine, with Canada, with Denmark. That's important. That becomes more and more important with each day because, as Operator Starsky often reminds us, for something really bad to happen, you simply need good people not to react. And it looks like that right now. Because according to the recent updates from the White House, they also stopped maintenance of Ukrainian F-16s. So they stopped the delivery of weapons which were sent to Ukraine by the previous administration. Not that they decided to stop, but they actually take away the previous one. They stopped sharing intelligence, and there are rumors they can actually share intelligence with the Kremlin to push Ukraine, for peace. Also stopped sharing satellite images, including those collected by private commercial companies you actually pay money for. Now they stop maintenance of F-16s. Starlink is the next. I'm 100% sure. The only reason they do not turn it off is because other countries may drop contracts, because that will seem very unreliable. And also because it's not for free, it's not the United States that are paying right now, but Germany, Poland, thank you so much. And it's quite obvious right now that the United States not just abandon their mission in NATO, their support for former allies, but they actually side with Russia. And Trump openly speaks about that when he says I don't know, okay, we turned off satellite images for them, we turned off intelligence, Russia is pumping them out, lots of civilians killed during these days because missile attacks were targeted traditionally, as Russians always do, and these are war crimes on heavily populated districts because they want to use terror to push Ukrainians to surrender. And Trump helps them with that. And he says, I understand why Putin does it. Anyone would do it. How can you treat such a person as a human being, not even the president of the strongest country once? And by the way, a lot of good people actually in comments below tell me that they cannot imagine how much time later Americans will need to spend to turn back to this normal relations with many good countries that are your friends. Russia is not your friend. Russia does not have free speech. Russia does not have wealth for middle class and normal people. Russia has very criminal attitudes and a plan to destroy Europe and then undermine the United States. Because trust me, the main ideology that unites China and Russia is not something else, is not money, is not communism even. It's anti-American attitudes. And they are laughing right now that they managed to push such person that dismantles the United States friendship with so many good countries, literally in days, not even months. I had a feeling it is coming, but I didn't think it would be that dynamic. And in all of this context, in all of this turbulence, Ukrainian drones also traveled to Bryansk, another region heavily targeted by our angry birds. And please remember that Russia is a very big war zone with drones traveling to 16 different regions, and literally Russians also bombing their own territories because they are that negligent. So a military plant was targeted there. So can you imagine that? With all this betrayal, with all this demotivation, humiliation that constantly comes from the White House, this like very classical, very ugly bullies, with the stopped delivery of weapons, with no satellite sharing and intelligence sharing. Can you imagine how like demotivated and betrayed we feel, honestly, when the United States not just focus on their own internal problems, which would be understandable, but actually side with Russia and do everything to weaken Ukraine so that we can surrender to Putin? We keep doing the job. We keep targeting Russian oil refineries because we know it is working no matter how much they lie. We keep targeting Russian military objects, and we know the only way to defend Ukraine and Europe and the United States, is to defeat the Kremlin. Because right now, it is the Kremlin that is ruining the checks and balances system of the United States. Something no one could have imagined was possible is happening right now. That's why we have to remain united. We have to trust each other. We have to support each other. We have to forgive each other. And I'm very grateful that we have this atmosphere on the community. Maybe it will sound like it's a dark humor. I thought it's fake, but it's real. You know that in post-Soviet territories, they love celebrating the 8th of March. It's not that popular in Ukraine anymore, but in Russia, it's like a very classical holiday. And they decided to give presents to the wives and mothers of the Russian soldiers. And their ministry delivered them presents. Guys, you will never guess what they chose as a present. I literally thought it was a joke, like very dark humor, but then I've checked and even Moscow Times report about that. So they brought to the mothers, wives of the Russian soldiers, many of whom are not here anymore, they decided to give them as presents for the 8th of March, meat grinders. Symbolic, right? But in this surreal world, this does not surprise me anymore. Let me know in the comments below. I'm genuinely interested. What surprises you the most about this present moment on the planet? What surprises you the most? If you can say about something positive, that will be great. If about something negative, that's totally understandable. So I will be reading and hopefully distracting myself from new BS coming from the WH. Join me on X. Our community surprisingly is growing there. Perhaps that is another battlefield to fight on. The Blue Sky community is amazing and growing quickly, so join me there too. I'm on Instagram and on Threads, and we have a very cordial Discord community. Thank you for buying me coffees, becoming my patrons and sponsors of the channel. That is an inspiration and a great support. Check our merch shop for lots of good items that work well as reminders and conversation starters about Ukraine, and we need that. I'm very grateful to all the people who demonstrate their support to Ukraine now. This helps, this can change a lot. But most importantly, thank you for being my friends and friends of Ukraine. This is important, we love you, and we know we have to remain resilient, no other choice, and now it matters not just for Ukraine, but for the world. Slava Ukraini!